By the way, in this BDS G2 series, what do you think about the fact that BDS is on red side all 5 games? What do you think of that?
I guess it's so weird because there's almost like an agreement of, it's like the meta's been so same, it's like so similar for such a long time. Oh, bless you, brother. It's just been so similar in terms of what has been played. So to not have all tools at your disposal to threaten with like a third ban to make the enemy like feel uncomfortable about being on red side is strange. It's like no Rumble prio. It's like Ashe Misfortune doesn't have the same weight. Support role as well. It's like Leona's permaban in other regions. So it's like just in terms of that assessment, I think BDS were very happy to put Adam on 5-pick. Because I think that they viewed BB as someone that can get very weird against the blind picks. I think in terms of top lane as a role, I think most top laners feel uncomfortable right now blind picking because like we have Nidalee. I understand how Miriam reached the point of picking Nidalee because he didn't want to expose himself to any counters. Like he is more of the lane focused one, and then occasionally we have the K'Sante, but there's a lot of answers into K'Sante, and there's the Kennen that was tried. There's a lot of answers into Kennen. I think that blind picking is awkward unless you are very, very proficient at K'Sante, Kennen, Renekton, as we're seeing like a Binnis or let's say a Breathe now in playoffs. And I think that BDS just wanted to make sure, boom, they are 5-picking for Adam, and I think that they wanted to be able to, like in their mind, there was no first pick that stood out to them as something that they need to pick. Like if there's no Rumble, no Rel for them, like they don't play Rumble, they want to play Rel, it will get banned, and then it's like Labrov just has, I want to play Rel, and if Rel is out, I want to play Rakan. There is no real like benefit from them in being blue side. But the fact that it is that way showcases and points to flaws in the champion pool in the first place, because I think there is an element of surprise that you can carry on blue side to kind of shoehorn people into positions, because in the end, they just banned Bromrel and they pick Nautilus every game. And the fact that that worked is strange when you think about it.
The saddest thing is as well, even though on paper it's not totally BDS's fault that they can't go to Worlds, although I will say this, I'm just going to put this out there, that benching of Adams aged very poorly right now. Just going to put that out there. All I'm going to say is that, well, look, we can't know if you would have won that 5th game, but that pretty much, because you didn't know fucking that, like, for the Mad Lions to be in the final, it turns out that has aged very poorly, I'm afraid. Like, if that was just for like, G2, who cares? It wouldn't have changed anything, but that in the end actually is what's cost you, because what you could never know is that G2 would inexplicably lose to Mad Lions later. So put that aside for a second, though. The reason why it's sad is this, because even though I actually agree with you, if I have to look at, like, who has a chance to do, like, an upset at Worlds, it actually is Mad Lions more than it is BDS. Like, because here's the difference. Put it this way, I think BDS would have a way better chance, for example, of beating like some of the NA teams. Like, they essentially play the perfect counter. They just draft for team fight and they just do better team fights around dragons. I think that would eat everyone who isn't Team Liquid up from LCS. But yeah, if you wanted them to play against like an LPL team, they'd get murdered, mate. And so one of the sad things is, you can even see, even at the end when they weren't that awesome, they still should have won this series, but they weren't that awesome, obviously, in this summer into now. They had a pretty bad playoffs. What's so sad to me is, this is why it's so hard to know what we're incentivizing in Europe. Because on the one hand, right, people don't want you to make loads and loads of roster moves. They want you to take a core and to develop it outright. That's exactly what BDS has done. They've taken this core, they gradually, if they've even taken the gamble when they took Crowdy out of the game, the one player we all thought was like the star player. It didn't matter. They've continued on even without him being pretty much the same team, just actually removed some of the issues potentially negative wise. And then I actually do think as well, probably the best team in Europe at Band-Aid, mate. The amount of teams now I've seen them look and go, it's obviously not working, do these cynical band-aids, might just be like these 2 players, you essentially have 2.5 champions now, and it works. Like, they can get into these winning situations. So like, there are so many things, even though I have questions about the roster, there's so many things about BDS I want to sort of say, hey, it's not actually as bad as people say. Like, I could sort of praise this. Like, I think you would have still gotten beaten if you got to Worlds, but you could have been potentially better than some of the other squads in the region. But this ending, though, I mean, in some ways, it's like fitting Yamato, because if they really have the ultimate mental block against G2, it does kind of take your appeal of really giving a fuck about BDS, because you have to be able to make us believe you can beat G2 if you want to win this region. And that's the worst part, I think, about the BDS story, is the BDS story isn't, can it be them or Fnatic? It could be them in the final. The problem is, if Fnatic's in the final, you think it's possible they can beat G2. The joke is, you now even think it's possible Mad Lions can beat G2, but nobody, including BDS players under fucking sodium pentothal / World War II interrogation systems, would ever actually say they believe they can. They know they can't beat G2, Yamato. This is the worst example I've ever seen of it. All the other ones, like, they lost to like better G2 or G2 good. This one, they just lost to themselves and G2. You know what I mean?
No. I'm with you 100%. It's like I hate the fucking Adam benching decision, because it's such a extreme decision to make so deep into like a split. Yes. Because if the issues if something so extreme happened at that moment, it must have been so extreme that he shouldn't be playing the next split. Like, I don't know, kind of reconciliation. Yeah. Or if it was something that just was like disciplinary, then this is an issue you should have seen a long time ago. And this is something that was like talked about, we heard like words about. So that part I don't like. But I have to give props to Striker, because they did manage to like make incremental like improvements, respectable improvements. But they have never been the team to bring anything to the table that is different than the top teams. And I think as an underdog, you need to be capable of shocking. You need to be weird. You need to be different. And BDS is a team that has made incremental improvements, but never at the pace of Fnatic and G2. So it's just, in those moments, you can just see in the Drake setups, they're sharper in terms of how super movement is, in terms of how they judge side lane. It's like BDS have never farmed 3 waves. And then finally, one time they did, in that series, there was the one time they shouldn't. They opened on 3 lanes with Nash, and all of a sudden lost whole Nash. So it's just very strange, because like, it seems like a team that is very well coached. Because I think usually when it's like band-aid solutions, it comes from that. It's like, we have these weaknesses, so we're going to hide them by doing this in game. But eventually you face the music. You can't get away with just opening on mid and hoping that you get the fight and hoping that you are going to be able to punish the enemy's mistakes, because both G2 and Fnatic, they know when they face against BDS, this is exactly what they're going to face up against. When they face up against Mad Lions, they're like, fuck, these guys are strange. Like, they throw tanky gold leads, but are we going to sit there and hope that happens? We don't want to be that person. So it's like, it fucks with your mind a little bit more playing against Mad Lions for sure, because BDS is such a known quantity at this point in time.
And then another problem is, even though I actually think for most of this year, it's probably actually been overall the best season of Nuke's career. He's actually had some splits where he probably could have been the 3rd or 4th best mid in the LEC. It's not even unreasonable. He actually's had some meta periods where it's even suited him. The problem he has is this. Cos Monty's one of those people who watches the big marquee games, but he's not watching every single game. He always tells me this, but I agree with him. It's like, it's not that Nuke's bad. It's like, but if you think about it, right, if you want to win the LEC with BDS, you're probably going to have to win a best of 5 against Caps and or Humanoid. Bro, again, does Nuke even himself believe he can win those games? When I saw him play Humanoid, he actually straight up, like some sort of old school noob, was trying to like 1v1 him and just getting fucking beaten, mate. And then when he plays Caps, it's not even in his brain he can win, mate. He's like, oh, well, shit. Hope it's not me that loses the game. Like, I don't believe it. I don't buy it. Whereas I'll tell you what, people might think, obviously it's not the greatest season this is, but I don't give a fuck. The reason why I always have a lot of faith in people like Larson is, bro, I actually do think with their style, they think they can be as good or beat these players. Because they play a different style of League of Legends, and they've done it before. They actually have the past historical reasoning to believe it's possible to win again against those people. So one thing I think with this roster is, most of this roster, essentially, it can be changed this year, Yamato. They're not making Worlds, right? If you look at this team, I think this is one of the ones, because they're actually starting with a fairly strong base and they're clearly well coached. I feel like this is a team. You don't need many changes. I mean, an obvious immediate one, I discussed this on a past episode, is everyone in theory who's smart in Europe is going to be in the irrelevant lottery. He's available in this off-season. Bro, this is one of the teams immediately where, even though you might think of BDS, you immediately think of Adam. He's kind of iconic, right? Mate, if I could just get irrelevant instead of Adam, it's time for me to move on from Adam. You know what I mean? Like, hey, he was a canny player. By the way, on a smaller LEC team, bring him in. He'll be a really up and down player with a unique personality. But if I could put a player like Irrelevant into BDS now, I think this team would become really good, mate. Like, wouldn't it just take away one of my weaknesses? What would you counter it out? Would you push back against the Adam kick if I was to do that?
I think Adam is such a strange player to quantify, because I think in terms of how you wish a player to progress, I think he just grew too slow. I think their commitment to playing around how Adam plays eventually will stagnate so hard, because it isn't the right way to approach the game in terms of how, like, which summoners he ran. And I think somewhere along the line they tried to change that, but I think Adam at this point has a lot of experience under his belt, And I think that you basically you get to that point where your biggest awkwardness and your biggest strength becomes your weakness. It's like you make the comparison to APA, right? I think APA, his improvement has been like, he's the most extreme one because his improvement is so obvious. It's like he beat Nico, Aurelion Sol, Ziggs, and that's what he stuck to, and that's what he brought to the table. He got target banned, and you could see his weakness. But then it turned into like a kind of a pocket strength as he was developing himself and adding more layers to his gameplay. Now people are facing APAs. Like, should we ban Ziggs? Is Aurelion Sol useful? Oh, he's fucking insane on Corki. Plays Tristana. Like, there's been a clear progression of growth, and Adam has so many years on his belt now that inconsistency in his play is not something that you can get away with, especially from a top lane position. I did think that he had like a fine series against G2. It was like all right. Like, he had like an okay Rumble game, like an Olaf angle that he dropped, that was all right. But I think top lane is a position where you're kind of hoping that you don't have that same level of risk, especially when your bot lane is Labrov and also, of course, Ice.
Yeah.
Like, those players are really, really, really good. So you're kind of hoping that you have like a stable rock. I think in regards to the conversation about Irrelevant, I think he's a very, very intriguing player, because I think mechanically he's super, super good. I always make the comparison that like he is. Bless you, brother. Bless you. I make the comparison that Alfari is living still in the league, and it's through Irrelevant, And
oh, sure.
I think that Alfari is a player that is like people talk about negatively, but like in terms of his laning, in terms of like how consistent he is, in terms of just his laning outputs and his like early to mid game was super, super good. What I want to see more from is that Irrelevant that we saw, I believe, in spring, where he was playing Gwen and like carrying late game fights and found like moments to fight around, rather than the one that we saw in, of course, summer, where he gained leads and then his team just couldn't find the fights. But Irrelevant, I think, is a player that has potential. He would look interesting on this roster. I think the main thing for me is like I could see a world where like I'm looking at Shio as well, because I feel like jungle is a position that is fairly stacked. It's like now when I'm looking over in North America, it's like Inspire's looking so good. It's kind of sad that he's not playing over in Europe. I think that people are a little bit too overly sensitive about how they viewed this name because of like past stories of how, let's say, intense he can be in a team environment, But I think in the end, it's like if a player is fucking good, you should be able to find a way to make it work and to accommodate. And Inspired is definitely like a player that is worth it, but maybe that's too far off in the future to even consider. But they did take one of the good ones, FlyQuest.
Well, here's the thing. They did also take Whippo, so, they evened it out. That's called balance, in the same way, Yamato. In the same way, Yamato, is if you're the company that dumps a bunch of toxic waste somewhere, you better also make like a fucking tree park for koala bears, So anyway, it's all good.
He's doing good. He's doing
it's
good.
all harmless banter. It's all harmless banter.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.